Hey, yo, what's the deal? It's your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag. You know what I mean? As of this recording, it is 2:30 p.m., September 10th. But, right now it is 12 p.m., September 11th, 2025. I decided to make this video, to record this video, to upload this video and stuff because I had to actually get something. I had to get something done. You know what I mean? I got to get something done downtown Brooklyn, as of this recording and such. I got to be downtown Brooklyn for something. I'm going to cut a little different when it comes down to, this topic and the way I am. You know what I'm saying? Because today marks, and I can't believe this shit, 24 years from... Today marks 24 years of the worst attack in American soil history, in the history of this beautiful country we call the United States, right? I'm going to get to the wrestling portion of this topic in a bit. But if this video go long, fuck it. It's worth it. You know what I'm saying? It's worth it. Every time I think of this day, right, I think of the horror that plagued 24 years ago in this country. I'll never forget where I was at. See, the thing about 9/11 was that, everyone knew where they was at, what they were doing, who they were with, what time it was. You know what I'm saying? When this fucked up event happened. They knew exactly where it was at. In the streets, that's what everyone talked about, legitimately. After 45 years that I lived on this world, that I lived in this earth, right? I've never seen a day in my life that everyone spoke about the exact same thing. Everyone who you speak to, anyone who you rode past spoke about the exact same thing. And that exact same thing, unfortunately, was the attack on the Twin Towers, aka the World Trade Center. So that morning, September 10th, 2001, at the time, I was like in a fucked up space in my life. This was a year before I moved to Fort Greene. I was still in Crown Heights. Now it was me and Mama Tag, right? And Mama Tag woke me up while I was sleeping. I didn't graduate school at the time. I went to Boys and Girls. You know what I mean? I unfortunately dropped out of school and such during that time. Mama Tag woke me up and told me to turn on the news. So I turned on the news, and I noticed there were certain stations that were blacked out because of the reception, the frequency in the systems and such, right? Channel 2 was the only channel that I seen besides cable, because I had cable, that showed what my eyes seen that changed my life forever. Right? And this is like, we're talking about like maybe 9 in the fucking morning. You know what I'm saying? And I turned to it and I'm in shock. I'm like 20 years old at the time. You know what I mean? And me and my mom would watch, asking questions like, what the fuck is going on and such. And, later on going into the day, I did not go outside until I say 3 o'clock. Actually, no, around 1 p.m. Right? And my eyes bear witness to the horror that happened within, between 9 a.m., right? And 1 p.m. when I stepped out. with with everything that happened, the planes hitting the towers and such. I wasn't there, but it was some scary shit. It was some horrifying shit. And then the towers came down and everything. I go outside, and when I mean the world died, it fucking died. What happened with COVID was nothing compared to what we saw on that fucked up day of 9/11. I felt more than bad for the victims that died. I also felt, during that fucked up tragic day, I also felt bad for the people who was around 9/11, not in the towers, but around the area when it took place. Because this is some shit that they got, that they're going to be traumatized with for the rest of their fucking lives. You know what I mean? And then forget about it. The things that I saw after, it was just fucking horrible. Like the world died completely. Completely. Mama Tag, just a year prior. You know what? Before I get to Mama Tag, let me see. Around 8 years before 9/11, right? There was another incident, right, with Timothy McVeigh. Now, I mean, when he blew up, I think he blew up the World Trade. You know what I mean? I think he bombed the World Trade Center and such, and it was the same deal, but this one was worse. Mama Tag, a year before, was supposed to go for something, I think, for welfare or something. I think it was a work thing, and she didn't go because the Twin Towers, aka the World Trade Center, were the tallest buildings in the fucking world. In the fucking world. If not the world, then the United States. And I resonate with that thought because every time I go around Ground Zero, and says every time I go there, like my heart turns to fear because of what happened. When I look up, that's when I get fucking scared. That's when I legit get fucking scared and shit. I'm like, man, I can't fathom. I can't imagine what these people went through, the horror that they went through when it happened. Right? It was just, like I said, it was even still to this day, and I don't like the fact that people still bring it up because it's an extremely fucked up tragedy. My box for my fans just dropped. It's an extremely fucked up tragedy. It's real fucked up. And there's a lot of pain when people talk about it. I also remember, flipping through channels and, they were saying, due to what happened, due to the nature of what happened at, in New York City, we are temporarily suspending programming and such. I'll never forget when I tried to turn to MSG. You know what I mean? Like they just showed, it was just quiet, right? And they showed a repeat of stock footage of the American flag, right? Just waving, right? It was just quiet. And then they had words scrolling on the side, not coming up. It was going from left to right, saying that service, programming is suspended temporarily due to the tragic events of 9/11. It was scary, man. It was real fucked up. It was by far one of the most, not even one of the most, it was by far the most fucked up day to happen, not only in New York, but all across the country. And look, with New York, people can complain about New York and such, the people were rude and shit like that. You know what I mean? But that day, like all that shit went out the window. You know what I'm saying? Like, New York and Boston, fuck that shit. At the end of the day, we're all Americans, B. You know what I mean? Like they came and they, like, the terrorists came, unfortunately, people from, Al Qaeda came and they fucked up the one symbol that represented New York City. You know what I mean? When you think of the United States, right? You think of freedom, right? You think of freedom. You think of, the Statue of Liberty and such. You also think of the World Trade Center. And mind you, the World Trade Center had it had a lot of businesses in there. A lot. We're talking about like 80 fucking floors, man. 80 fucking floors, B. You know what I mean? It was fucked up. I also remember too that there were a couple games suspended, and if I'm not mistaken, I think, and I'm gonna get to the wrestling portion of this right now. I think either it was the Mets that played the first, the first game, nationally since 9/11, or it was that WWE SmackDown. You know what I mean? They didn't give that SmackDown on UPN 9 here in New York. They didn't give it. They did not give it. Vince McMahon caught a lot of flack for that. Vince caught a lot of flack for saying fuck it, But then again, I understood. I understood why he did it. Now I mean, because the world needed some sort of outlet. You know what I mean? Some sort of distraction from what happened in that fucked up day. You know what I'm saying? They desperately needed it. You know what I mean? So in retrospect, I give Vince props for that. I give Vince props for that because yes, people are still grieving and such. And nobody wanted to do anything. I didn't want to do shit. Now I mean, I didn't want to play game. I didn't want to play no video games. I didn't want to do nothing. I did not want to do shit. Now I mean, because of what happened, right? It was just, like I said, the world died. The world just died completely. Everything was not the same after that. Everything. The world has changed in terms of interaction and also, how you approach buildings and such. It was just, like I said, it was just insane when you think about it, man. It was just, what happened was just, man. Let me get to the wrestling part, right? A lot of things did happen during that time too, when it came down to pro wrestling and 9/11. Like I said, with what we saw, unfortunately, WWE at the time, the World Wrestling Federation, they were the first ones. Actually, what I did was I just decided to go to ChatGPT just to ask questions, right? And it did say they were the first major entertainment company to run a live public event after the attacks. There was an interesting question when I asked ChatGPT. They said, if WCW was still alive, how would they have handled 9/11? And that's an easy answer. They would have handled it the exact same way that responded. They would have responded the exact same way that the World Wrestling Federation responded. And any other sports program, any other sports league and such responded. Now, I mean, like that's simple. I might make a whole video on that at some point. But a lot of stuff, a lot of things changed. You know what I mean? A lot of things changed in terms of professional wrestling and such. So, I think it was Selena Vega's father who unfortunately was a victim of 9/11. You know what I'm saying? Chris Kanyon was, ironically enough, he was supposed to have gotten on a flight on 9/11, right? But then he changed his plans last minute. So he had divine intervention. You know what I'm saying? The thing also is, like I said, the United States needed a mascot. They desperately needed a mascot for, for a distraction. You know what I mean? They clearly needed a mascot. And I think with pro wrestling, people like Hulk Hogan, you know what I mean? Like, Kurt Angle, anyone who was like pro-American, right? Shit, even The Undertaker, right? He had the United States flag and such. That was needed, clearly. It clearly was needed, without a shadow of a doubt. You know what I'm saying? It was definitely needed. And also, I also remember too, let me go back and such. I remember seeing album covers, right? I remember seeing album covers that had 9/11 stuff on there. Hip hop album covers. I think, I could be wrong, but I think Dilated Peoples had an album cover that had 9/11. I think, I'm not absolutely sure. I would have to go back and check, but I clearly remember that. You know what I'm saying? I remember that and such. And, again, this is basically a day. Also, let me go back to that SmackDown. That SmackDown on September 13th, 2 days after the 9/11 attacks, a lot of the wrestlers were basically just, they were just speaking their mind and such about. So, you know what? It wasn't even about, it wasn't even about WWE ruling the pro wrestling industry. No. Fuck that. Because that went out the window that day. This was more about healing. You know what I mean? This was more about healing. And like I said, in that respect, I I got to give Vince props for that. You know what I mean? I got to give Vince props for that because the world needed healing at that time. Desperately. And like I said, it took a while because also leading into the days after 9/11, like I said, the world was just dead. It was just completely, it was done. It was done, unfortunately. And I honest to God think that, we listen, it don't matter where you at. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, fucking Utah, what else? Arizona, Texas, Seattle, Washington, wherever the fuck you at in the United States of America, right? We as Americans, we came back strong. Now, I mean, we came back legit strong and such. And I think after what happened, we became a better country. We have become a way better country, post 9/11, because, the old saying, what don't kill us makes us stronger, right? And this unfortunately, this made us stronger. You know what I mean? It basically showed that, no matter what the fuck you do to us, you know what I mean? Like, you could beat us down and everything, but we're going to keep on coming back. We're going to come back. The United States are not quitters, man. You know what I mean? America is not a country where we quit. You know what I mean? Just like Lil Kim says, you know what I mean? And Light Us Up. You know what I mean? Like, we don't run, we run shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's, again, you have to. And then everyone came together. Like, no matter what feud you had, everyone came together. Why? They came together for the good of this fucking country. Now, I mean, stars and stripes, man. Stars and stripes. I talk a lot of shit about pro wrestlers and things like that, but I know my limits. You know what I mean? I know how, and I'll be honest with y'all. Like, yes, I might be Puerto Rican descent and such, but I am beyond fucking proud and happy to be a fucking American. I don't give a fuck what no one says. Now, I mean, I am beyond happy to be a fucking American. You know what I'm saying? Yes, this country might go through a lot of shit. You know what I mean? Like, yes, all right, America, yes, does America has its flaws? Yeah, every other fucking country has its flaws. Every other country has its flaws. Know what I mean? But this is why they call this country the greatest country in the world. You know what I mean? And they call it this for a fucking reason. They call this country the the home of the brave and the land of the free. Now I mean the freedom. The freedom. Everyone expresses themselves differently and such, right? But when it comes down to, protection of this country, we probably do this better than anybody else in the motherfucking world. You know what I mean? This is the longest video that I have ever done. You know what I mean? I felt like I had to speak from the heart and speak my mind and such. You know what I mean? This is 20 minutes. God damn. This is the longest. But again, I feel like I need to speak my heart. Need to speak my piece. You know what I mean? So I might be coming with another video today. So I'm going to holler at y'all. Peace.